today's project of the Rustic Pocket Shawl, you will need a DK weight yarn, scissors, tape measure, a tapestry needle for seaming in ends, stitch markers, and you will need two different size crochet hooks. For this, we will use a 6mm for the body of the work and a 5.5mm for the ribbed borders. So to talk a little bit about the yarn for today's project, this is Life DK by Stylecraft, which I ordered on lovecrafts.com. This is a acrylic wool blend, and it is machine washable, which I think is fantastic when you're making a present for somebody. And the color is Pebble Nap. For this particular project, I used a little bit over 3 skeins for a gift that was for somebody who is 5 foot 10 inches. To begin the pocket shawl, we're actually going to start with the ribbed border that goes along the first pocket. To do that, I'm starting with my 5.5mm crochet hook, and I will only use this for the ribbed portions of the shawl. I'm going to go ahead and make a slip knot, and you can make a slip knot however you decide to. I'm just going to do it this way because it's easy. And I'm going to start with chaining 9. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. 9 chains. I'm going to skip the first chain from the loop and work into the second with just a straightforward single crochet. I go through that loop, pull through, and then pull through 2. Same thing for the second one. Through the loop, single crochet. I'm on 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, oops, easy fix, 7 and 8. Now to do the ribbing, we're going to continue single crocheting, but we're going to begin single crocheting in the back loop only. So I've reached the end of my row. I'm going to chain 1 for my turning chain, which does not count as anything, and I'm going to start the back loop only. And before I start that, I just want to show you exactly what the back loop is. So here are both of my loops. Can you see both loops? The back loop is the one that's furthest away from me, and that's what's going to create the ribbing pattern. So to show you on the next one too, so both loops are right there, and I'm only going to go through that back loop there. So I'm going to get my loop going again. I'm going to back loop only, single crochet until I get to the end. And there's the second one, and you can see the third one right there, and the 4th, 5th, 7th, and then the 8th. And the 8th one can sometimes be a little bit tricky, but there you go, we got it. And always we're going to chain 1 and turn. And you're always going to work in the back loop, and that's what's going to give it the ribbed pattern. So we're going to go ahead and work row 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Oh, what am I doing? I'm counting wrong. Let's see, where are we? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I skipped one somewhere in there. 7 and 8. Again, chain 1 and turn. So you can kind of see the ribbing coming together. And I'm going to keep going on this until I reach, for this particular pattern, 42 rows, which is going to lead me to about 21 rib areas. Whatever length you decide to do for your pocket, it just needs to be an even number. The moss stitch, which is what we're going to be attaching onto this ribbed stitch, will be worked in an even number, so that's what's going to help us. So I'll do a couple more, and then I'm going to go ahead and meet you back once I'm done with my 42 rows. So I'm going ahead and finishing my last back loop only single crochet, and now what I'm going to do is we're actually going to start working along the back here, just like that, with single crochets. And we have 42 rows, so we should have 42 single crochets on top. Now this is the time for me to put aside my 5.5 millimeter crochet hook, and I'm going to go ahead and pick up my 6 millimeter. So go ahead, go in there, do your kind of turning chain since you're going to be rotating onto the side, and we're going to single crochet into each single crochet. So for the first one, I'm going to go right there, single crochet, and then I'm going to go into the next space that I can single crochet. Now, it's not always easy to see where to single crochet in these stitches. So the main thing to try to do is to just figure out where that at the end that you have 42. So single crochet, that's 2, 3, 4, 5, go right in there for 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. You can kind of see that coming together really, really nicely. One of the other things I'm going to suggest is that you put in your first single crochet, you put in a stitch marker. And that's going to help you differentiate between what was your starting single crochet and what was your turning chain, okay? So I'm going to leave that there, and I'm going to continue on, and I'll meet you at the end of my single crochets. Okay, so we're almost at the end of our single crochet row, and I'm going to go ahead and double check counting once I do my turn, but I'm pretty confident that I'm going to have 42. Now, for me, with the number of rows that I picked, I have my tail right here. I'm just going to tuck that in for this last stitch just to kind of bring it together. I will weave that end in later. So this is 42. And I'm going to go ahead and pull through. And now we're going to turn our work to start the moss stitch, and I'm going to show you how we're going to do that. So we're going to go ahead and chain 2 and turn our work. And the moss stitch always going to start off with a chain 2 when you're working on an even number of rows, and you're going to end always with a single crochet. And the moss stitch works by basically, it's a simple repeat of single crochet, chain 1, single crochet, but what makes the moss stitch different from the column stitch is that you're going to single crochet into the chain space on the next row, and it makes a very pretty pattern, which you'll see. So our first chain 2 is going to act as a chain space, and we're going to single crochet into the second chain there. So single crochet, chain 1, skip 1, single crochet. And I'm going to chain 1 and just set this aside for a second. And in that chain space, especially if you're a beginner, really good idea to go ahead and put a stitch marker in there. And that'll let you know that when you're on your way back, that's where you're going to end with your single crochet. So chain 1, skip 1, single crochet. Chain 1, skip 1, single crochet. Chain 1, skip 1, single crochet. And we're going to do this until we get to the end. So I'll meet you back at the end, and I'll show you how to do the turn. So we're getting close to the end of our first row of the moss stitch pattern. I did go back and count everything to make sure that I had 42. So I just single crocheted. I'm going to skip one and I'm going to single crochet into the next one, chain one, skip one, and then here's our last single crochet. So remember, with the moss stitch, you're always going to end on a single crochet and you're always going to begin with a chain two. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and chain two and turn. Okay, now it does look like it's getting wider, but as you go along, you'll notice that the moss stitch condenses, it brings everything together, and that's why we upped to a larger size crochet hook. So I've chained two, and I'm going to go ahead and single crochet into that first chain space from before. So you'll see, let me get my needle just to show you. This is your single crochet from the row before, and that's your chain space. Now we'll be single crocheting into that chain space. So here we are. We're going to single crochet, chain one, skip your single crochet, and go into the next chain space. Chain one, into the next chain space with the single crochet. Again, into that next one. And we're going to keep going till we get to the end of the row. So you can kind of see how it's coming together. Again, if you're worried about where to go at the end, go ahead and put your stitch marker into that loop. And also, if you feel like your edge is a little bit uneven, do not worry about it. With this particular pattern, we're actually going to be folding the scarf or the shawl in half. So this is going to be seamed up and it'll look great at the end. So to continue, I'm going to just go ahead. I've chained one, skip the single crochet, and single crochet into the chain space. And we'll keep going with this. So single crochet, chain one, skip the single crochet, go into the chain space, single crochet, and go ahead. So I'm going to meet you back at the end, and we'll do one more row together, and then we'll just continue it until we get to the length that we want. Okay, so I have just a couple more left to go. I'm chained one, single crochet, chain one, and then here's my chain space, so I'm going to go ahead and single crochet into that. And then remember, chain two always, and turn. And then we're going to go ahead and single crochet into our chain space from the previous row. So single crochet, chain one, move your stitch marker so that you know where to go for your next row. To make it nice and clear. And now we're going to skip our single crochet and go into the next chain space. Chain one, get a little bit more yarn, and single crochet. I'm gonna go ahead and do this a couple times really slowly, just so that you can see exactly what I'm doing. And again, this is our single crochet. I have chained one, so I'm going to skip that single crochet and then go into the chain space. These are the two single crochets. I'm going to go into this chain space that's right here. And you can see, as I was talking, that moss stitch does like to condense down, so it will make everything come together really well with the larger hook size. So chain one, skip your single crochet, go into your chain space, single crochet, chain one, skip one, single crochet. And now you can see this pattern coming together really, really nicely, and our edges kind of straightening out a little bit. So do you see how pretty the pattern is here? I'm going to continue this for a few more rows, and then I'm going to come back and show you exactly what it looks like. Okay, so I've done about close to 35 to 40 rows, and I wanted to show you how pretty it's coming together. So what will eventually happen is what this pocket is will be folded over and will basically become part of the shawl, which I'll show you as when we get there. I'm gonna go ahead and continue just doing my normal crochet pattern. The chain one, skip one, go into the chain space for the single crochet, moss stitch. And I wanted to just show you that, especially if you're a beginner, the ends of the corners or the turning part of the moss chain can be really, really tricky. So I wanted to show you why it's a really good idea to put in your stitch marker. So I'm doing my last single crochet, and you can see, and get my needle here, here is the single crochet, and here is the chain 2 space from the previous row. So if I didn't have that marker there, it's easy to make a mistake and go into your single crochet. So by keeping this marker here, I ensure that I keep my 42 stitches going and I don't make a mistake. So I'm going to go ahead and single crochet into that corner there. I'm going to chain 2, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take off, let me put this back in here just to keep it in place. I'm going to undo my stitch marker from the previous row and go ahead and put it on the next row just like that. So it's just kind of hanging there, but it'll keep that chain 2 space. I'm going to turn my work, and you can see here, here's my chain 2. This is my single crochet from the previous row. So this chain 2 correlates with this stitch. And then here is the chain space right there between my 2 single crochets. So I'm going to go ahead and single crochet into the chain space, chain 1, skip the previous row single crochet, and go into the next chain space. But by keeping that stitch marker right there, it really helps identify it, because you can already see how it kind of fades into the background unless you have something there to identify it. So highly, highly recommend using the stitch marker. And also, as you're going, go ahead and count your rows every once in a while to make sure that you still have your 42 stitches going across. All right, for this particular project, you want to measure the width of the scarf, not including the pockets. That's your arm width. So I'm making this for somebody who's about 5'10". So 5'10" in inches, I think that's about 70 inches. And then I'm going to make the pockets a certain size and then add both of those pockets on to the width, the total width of my project. So I'm probably going to be looking at anywhere, let's see how far, this is like a nice pocket size right now. So if I were to measure the pocket, not including my hem, I have about, let's say, anywhere between almost 7 inches, I would say, which is perfect. So 7 inches for each pocket, that's 14, plus the 70 that we were saying before for somebody that's 5'10", and that puts me at 84 inches. So I have to do this crochet project for 84 inches before I'll be ready to sew it together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to crochet the main body, and then I'm going to come back and show you how to do the ribbed edging on the other side. So I'll meet you back here once I'm done with my 84 inches. So I'm coming up on my last stitch here for my pocket shawl, and you can see this thing, well, you can't really see because I don't think all of it can fit in the camera, but it is very long. So for this particular gift that I'm going to be giving, I mentioned that the person is about 5'10", and so I wanted to do a shawl that is their arm width, and generally the arm width is about their height. So 5'10", 70 inches, plus an additional 7 inches or so on each pocket. So this total is between, I would say I did 340 rows, and it seems like a whole lot, but they're small rows, so it went pretty quickly. And I ended up with about between, I'd say, 82 and 84 inches, depending on the stretch. And since there is a little bit of ease to this, I'm not too worried about it being exactly correct. So now that we're back here, we're going to basically mimic what we did on this end here. So for this end, we started initially with this, with the ribbed edging. We did a single crochet and then we started in with our moss stitch. So we're gonna kind of work backwards here, where we're going to go ahead and we've chained one. I'm gonna flip my work and then I'm going to work a single crochet into every single crochet as well into every chain space. So before we were just working single crochets in the chain spaces, now we're gonna go ahead and just single crochet all the way down. And what this is gonna do is it's gonna make a nice little border for us to do our ribbing. And when it comes to the ribbing, there's going to be two ways that you can do the ribbing, and it's whatever you really feel comfortable with. You can either do the ribbing separately, or you can go ahead and attach it on. It's whatever your comfort level with is. If you feel confident enough to go ahead and do it attached, then you can go ahead and do that. So I'm going to finish my row of single crochets and then I'll meet you at the end. Okay, here we are coming to the end of our single crochet row. We went into the last single crochet, but remember, this is a moss stitch. So we want to grab that last chain that's right there, that chain of 2 that we did. We're going to grab that and go through. And so now at this point, we should have 42 single crochets. That's going to help with our ribbing pattern. Since this is a beginner pattern, my recommendation is going to be to go ahead and tie off here and then make your ribbing pattern separately and seam it on. If you feel comfortable, you can go ahead and, remembering to switch over to your 5mm crochet hook, you can go ahead and do a single crochet of 8 and then work your ribbing, slowly slip stitching it into the sides. But I think for a beginner, it's definitely going to be easier to do it separately, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now. So I've set my scarf to the side and I'm going to go ahead now and make a slip knot, and I'm going to start my ribbed edge for the second pocket. So we're going to go ahead and make a chain of 9, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. We're going to go from the second chain from the hook and go ahead and make a single crochet there. And you could do back loop. I really tend to like back loop if the edging is going to be seen, but I think for this, the edging is going to be just hidden, so you don't need to really worry about it. So I should have, by the time I'm done, I've got 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I have 8 single crochets. I'm going to chain 1, turn my work, and remember for ribbing, we're going to work in the back loops only. So I'm going to go ahead and go again. You can see the back loop there. I didn't go through both. This would be going through both loops. There's the back loop only. I'm going to go ahead and pull through both, and then back loop only, single crochet to the end. And again, you want to always keep track when you're going and making sure that you have exactly 8 single crochets by the end. That's 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. And then we're going to chain 1 for our turning chain, which doesn't count, and we're going to turn our work and just go right back into the next row. And we're going to do this a total of 42 times to match the 42 that we started out with. So I'm going to go ahead and work on this, and when I'm done, we'll start seaming it onto the end of our scarf or our shawl, and I'll show you how to now close it up and make the edges. Okay, I have finished my row of 42 single back loop only single crochets in order to get the ribbing, and I'm using stitch markers to keep them in place when I start the whole seaming together process. Now, if you feel like you're not matching up, this would be a good place to take a second and block your work before you do the seaming, and that way you'll have everything match up. You can also block your work afterwards, but I find that this would be a better area. So I'm going to go ahead, and I've left the tail long from where I started, where I ended this pattern. I'm going to go ahead and put it in. If I put this sideways, we'll get that piece of yarn out. You can see the edge along here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go through both for the first one, bring my edges together, and then I'm going to go ahead and just grab the top and the outside just like that. And we're just doing a basic whip stitch. And I'm going to keep doing this to sew in both ends, and I will meet you back when I'm done. Get that little piece out of there. I have finished seaming on the other ribbed border to the sleeve, and I folded over the sleeves on both ends and measured them off. What I've done is I've made sure that whatever this measures, and I've counted my stitches, is the same that's on this side. And I've used stitch markers to help guide me on both sides. I actually had to dig into a new bag of stitch markers because I always seem to misplace these little stinkers. So I have my stitch markers here and my stitch markers here, and I've done the exact same thing for the pocket on this side. So you can see that they match up quite nicely, okay? So I have all of this done. What I'm gonna do now is I'm actually going to make my ribbed border for both sides, and what we'll do is we'll go ahead and we'll seam it on, and we'll combine and close this at the same time that we add on the seamed border. So I'm going to show you that in the next step so you can see how we make the ribbed border, and then the last step will show you how to attach it. So I finished one side of the ribbed edging for the scarf, and it's very similar to the edging that we did for the pockets. The only difference is that was 8 single crochets and this is 10, so it is going to be a little bit wider just to give the scarf a little bit more volume. I went ahead and I chained enough to match the scarf. And so when I say that, there's 2 ways to do this. You can go ahead and if you have your scarf, you can count every single one that you did and make sure that your ribbing matches that. That's one way to do it. The other way, which is a little bit easier, is to actually measure it in inches and then make your ribbed border to match. And the only thing that you want to make sure you do if you're measuring it is once you make one set is go ahead and count how many you have and make the other side match exactly. If that's a little bit confusing, I will explain it a little bit more clearly in my blog post, and you'll get the option to see if you'd like to count your stitches with the actual scarf or if you just prefer to measure. So I've done one side, and let me show you how I did that. So I have my yarn and I have my 5.5 millimeter crochet hook. Remember, we went down in crochet hooks for the ribbed border, and then we went up to a 6 millimeter for the body of the scarf. So I'm going back to my 5.5 millimeter crochet hook. I'm going to go ahead and make my slip knot. Oops. I'm going to go ahead and make that slip knot this time. And now that I have that, I'm going to go ahead and make a chain of 11. Okay? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and 11. So now I'm going to skip the closest chain from my hook and go into the second one. And I'm going to go ahead and single crochet in there. And then I'm going to keep going with my single crochets. I almost went ahead and did the pattern for the body, but nope, this is single crochets only. So I'm at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10. And now I'm going to chain 1, and remember that chain 1 doesn't count as anything. We're going to turn our work, and we're going to work in the back loop only. So again, just that one right there. And I'm going to single crochet and get a little bit more yarn and make my way back. So just continue to single crochet, back loop only, and that's how you're going to get your nice little ribbed border there. Oops. Do that again. And when you're doing this, because this is going to be really, really long, I think mine turned out to be around 130 something rows. But when you're doing it, you want to make sure, or not 130 something, sorry, 260 something rows. You want to make sure that you're constantly counting. It's easy to lose track when you have a smaller area, so make sure every once in a while you count your stitches to make sure you still have 10. The other thing I want to show you is, so I'll chain 1, do my turning chain, and flip. And sometimes it can be a little bit confusing. You can skip over this first one here. It's easy to want to go right into this one here. So make sure that when you turn, you look to see where that first, there it's in focus, where that first chain is, or where, and that first stitch is, and you're going to back loop right into there. All right, so I'm going to continue to do this for a long time until I get to the length that I want, or that I match the stitches on the scarf, and then I'm going to show you how we seam it all together. I might take some pictures and show you what it looks like once it's laid out, because what you really need to do for this is you need to have a big surface and lay it flat. If you don't lay it flat, then there's a chance that it'll bump up. I tried to first do this on a bed, and the scarf was not laying flat on the bed, so I went ahead and laid it out on my dining room table, and that really seemed to help. That was nice and flat, it was nice and straight, and I could ensure that it was straight so that I could make sure that I was getting the right measurements. So I'm going to continue with my ribbed border until I get to the length I want, and then I'll meet you back. Hello all, I've finished my ribbing for both sides, and I've actually attached it onto this side. You can see that here's the pocket that's attached on there. It's nice and seamed shut. My hand doesn't go through, so I have a nice pocket. I'm going to do the same thing here. So I've folded over my pocket, I've attached my ribbing, and I have a really long end here from where I did my ribbing that I'm just going to leave to help seam up the ends, and I'm going to show you a little trick on how to seam up this side so you still get a nice definition for the pocket. So the best way to do this is actually to lay it flat on a long surface like your kitchen or dining room table and begin seaming it up. So after I'm done filming this, I'll probably go take it to my kitchen table, lay it out, and then seam it up. And I'll have a picture of what it looks like laid out on my blog post. But just to show you, so I have a very long seam with my needle attached, and I've attached it in this corner. I have the pockets closed, and along the way I've used almost every single stitch marker I own to line up this whole end. So to start, I'm actually going to, where my pocket is, I'm going to go through the end there and just take that in, and that's just going to really, really lightly connect my two sides. And I can take out this first stitch marker. I get happy every time I go through and I take out a stitch marker. And then I have 3 parts right here in this pocket shawl. I have the bottom part of the pocket, the ribbed border, and then the top part of the pocket. So I'm going to go through the bottom part, pick up part of the pocket, and then go through on the other side, just like that. And I'm going to pull my very, very long piece of yarn through, and then I'm going to go back on the same side. So unlike the whip stitch where you go back and forth, for just this part with the pocket, it's easier just to go back and forth from the same side, and I'll show you. So now I have my second one. I'm going to go through the second loop, and then I'm going to go through, so make sure you know where your loops are. I'm going to go through my second loop right there. So now I'm back to the underside of the pocket. Now that I've gotten to the underside, I'm going to go back on the same side to the next loop, go through my ribbing, and then pick up my third loop, just like that. And what this does is it makes a nice edge, as you'll see, where to give a little definition to the pocket as you're going. So I'm just going to keep doing that. I'm going to go through there, pick up the next part of my ribbed border, next single crochet, and then go through the back part. And then we'll continue from here all the way up to this, and then when I get to this corner, I'll show you how I get to the rest of the ribbed border. So I'm almost finished with the pocket portion of the scarf. I'm still working on the 3-part edge where I have the front part of the pocket, I have my ribbed border, and then I'm going to go through the back and grab the back end of the pocket. Get all this yarn out, and then working from the same side where I have my stitch marker there to help guide me, I'm going to go through the pocket. Remember to grab your ribbed border, and then after you grabbed your ribbed border, go ahead through the pocket. And I'm going to take out this stitch marker. It might help a little bit here. The stitch markers really do help in terms of getting your, of keeping you straight though. So I've gotten all 3. I'm going to pull through. And then since this is a corner, I might just go through one more time just to make it nice and even. Go through the ribbed and then go through the back portion. And we're basically done with seaming the pocket part, the 3-part pocket part. And I'm going to show it to you really quickly. And when I worked it, I really only took the very edge of the ribbed border because you want it to be consistent as you move forward. If you take too big of an area here, then this part of the ribbed border is going to be really short and this part's going to be really long. So you want it to be pretty consistent. Now to keep going, what I'm going to do is I'm going to feed it through, and now we're just back at this point to whip stitching. So to show you how we're going to do the whip stitch, I have my yarn here. I'm going to go ahead and just grab some yarn from here and grab yarn from this side, and we're going to keep going all the way up. And when I get to the end, I'll tie off, and what we should have is something that's going to look very similar to this. So I have my pocket border, and then I just basically whip stitched all the way up the sides. And once we get to the end, basically I'll be done, and I'll sew in my edges, and I'll have a really pretty pocket shawl to give to somebody as a gift. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments below or comment on in my blog. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really does help. And please do subscribe. I will be putting out new patterns about every other week, and there'll be corresponding free pattern on my blog at www.thecraftycrocheteer.com. Thank you and happy crocheting.